The Alexander brothers were found guilty of sex trafficking in the Southern District of New York. The question is, why was that the case? Did the jury get it right? And was there enough evidence to actually prove that they did something? That's what this video is going to be talking about. So, this case involved Tal, Oren, and Alon Alexander. They were very successful real estate brokers who were from Florida, accused of sex trafficking. This is a case that especially stemmed from the Me Too era and the fact that victims now feel more comfortable coming out and reporting some of the things which have happened to them in especially in cases involving well-known individuals, much like the Alexander brothers were. So the first reason why I believe that there was a conviction in this case is partly because of the rigorous investigative techniques that the FBI has now. Cases in the Southern District of New York are federal cases, not state cases. And that means that for a prosecution to take place involving that court, you will have typically been investigated by the federal authorities such as the FBI. Why is that significant? Because the resources that the FBI has is very different from a local small police force. You're not dealing with, for example, a police force in a tiny town in Texas. You're not dealing with a local sheriff somewhere in a rural community. You are dealing with the best of the best, and that's just the law enforcement authorities. Talk less of the actual attorneys. These attorneys will also be highly educated, Ivy League, and very ambitious because they view a lot of cases that they do in SDNY, in the Southern District of New York, as a stepping stone for their career. So the FBI, when they mount a case, are likely to have, for example, the ability to wiretap suspects, to conduct 24/7 surveillance because they have the money to do that. They can also speak to victims. They can also get inside information from witnesses who know the alleged perpetrators in the case. So that already means that you're dealing with great difficulty when you typically face a federal case. And for additional information, or to make matters worse, the federal authorities have around a 97% conviction rate. Another reason that I saw that made this case different from, for example, the Diddy case is the torrent, the volume of text messages. That means that the jury was able to get into the minds of these suspects, because it's much harder to, for example, explain away incriminating text messages such as, for example, bring the drugs or things of that sort. How do you explain that when you are accused of administering noxious substances to victims? They could not explain that easily. And in fact, they didn't explain it because they never went on the stand, which is obviously typical in criminal cases. Ordinarily, criminal defense attorneys don't like their clients to go on the stand, but it's difficult to have evidence like that against you and to not explain it away in an effective and confident manner. So I believe that the text messages definitely did them in. Also, there was the unfortunate occurrence of the boys being named in the Epstein files too. that may have played a factor. It's not clear if it did, but it may have played a factor because of the concept of guilt by association. So the fact that they were in those files may have swayed some jurors to think, well, maybe they did something wrong because they are friends with people that are criminals and are known for being guilty of the very same crimes that these brothers were guilty of. Another reason that there was a successful prosecution was the sheer number of victims. There were many victims in this case who testified that the brothers did the exact same things or were guilty of very similar crimes. It's easier to impeach, it's easier to make a single victim look like they're lying, look like they're biased, or they're saying things which are untrue. It's a lot more difficult to make several different victims look that way. There's an anecdote about what happened at trial, which is that when the lawyers accused some of the victims of effectively bringing lawsuits against the brothers and the criminal prosecution just for the purpose of effectively undertaking a money grab, one of the witnesses, who was a woman, testified that that was not her motivation because she was the daughter of a billionaire. So how can she actually have wanted to make money off these guys? That is powerful testimony given the cogent logic behind it. So that's another reason why this was a difficult case. And I believe that is why these women were able to effectively mount a case that made the brothers look like predators, made them look like they were guilty, and also convince a jury that they were guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The amalgamation of all of the factors, the investigation from the FBI, the text messages that came out of court, the woman's testimony as well on the stand. This is why they were convicted, although they intend to appeal, but we'll see how that turns out.